Cathara pressed her webbed fingers against the cold glass of the observation deck. Below her, the crystal blue oceans of Aquanus Prime sparkled in the light of their twin suns. Beautiful coral cities dotted the seafloor like jewels. Schools of silver fish danced between the towers where her people lived and worked. Everything looked peaceful. Everything looked normal. But Cathara knew better. In 6 months, it would all be gone. She turned away from the window and looked at the datapad in her hands. The numbers never changed, no matter how many times she read them. The stellar fragment was massive, bigger than their largest moon. It was moving fast, pulled by gravity toward their world. When it hit, the oceans would boil. The atmosphere would burn. Every living thing on Aquanus Prime would die. "Still looking at those readings?" asked Veltar, her assistant. The older Serini swam up beside her, his gills fluttering with worry. "Maybe the scientists made a mistake." Cathara shook her head. Her long hair floated around her shoulders like seagrass. "I asked them to check 5 times. The math is correct. The fragment will hit us in exactly 173 days. Veltar was quiet for a moment. His large, dark eyes reflected the light from the datapad. "What do? We asked for help." Cathara touched the communication device on her wrist. "I have been studying the galactic records all week. There are 47 species in the Council with the technology to stop this thing. Some could destroy it completely. Others could push it away from our world. Will they help us?" Cathara wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that civilized species would not let an entire world die when they had the power to save it. But the more she read about the Council, the more worried she became. The Vorthic Empire controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes. They were insect-like creatures who thought only about profit and loss. Everything had a price to them. Everything could be bought or sold. The ethereal collective were beings made of pure energy. They claimed to be wise and peaceful, but they rarely helped anyone. They said they did not interfere with the natural order of things. The Dratmori hegemony were proud warriors. They respected only strength and power. They looked down on species that could not defend themselves. Then there were dozens of other species. Some were traders like the Vorthek. Others were scientists or explorers or rulers of great empires. All of them had advanced technology. All of them had the power to save Aquanus Prime. But would they want to? Cathara swam to her desk and activated the computer. Files about each council species appeared on the screen. She had been studying them for days, trying to understand how they thought. What did they value? What would make them want to help? The Serini were artists and healers. They created beautiful music and poetry. They had discovered ways to heal minds as well as bodies. Their philosophers wrote about peace and harmony. But they had no armies. They controlled no trade routes. They had no rare minerals or powerful weapons. What could they offer in exchange for their lives? "Ambassador Cathara?" A young voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see her aide, Merlin, swimming quickly toward her desk. "The High Council wants to speak with you." Cathara nodded. The High Council ruled their world. They had chosen her to be their voice to the galaxy because she understood other species better than most Serini. She had studied their languages and customs. She had spent years learning how to communicate with aliens. Now, she had to convince those aliens to save her people. The High Council met in the deepest part of the ocean, in a chamber carved from living coral. 12 elderly Serini sat in a circle, their bioluminescent patches glowing softly in the dark water. They had ruled wisely for centuries, guiding their people toward peace and knowledge. "Cathara," said Elder Numara, the oldest of them all, "you have studied the situation. Can the galactic species save us?" "Yes, Elder. Many of them have the technology we need." "Then you must go to the Council Nexus immediately. Speak to every species. Make them understand what will happen if they do nothing. Cathar bowed her head. I will do my best, Elder. But I must tell you the truth. The council species think differently than we do. They do not make decisions based on compassion alone. They will ask what they gain by helping us. Elder Nomara's eyes dimmed. And what can we offer them? Our knowledge of healing, our art, our friendship. Even as she said the words, Kethera knew how weak they sounded. How could music compete with money? How could poetry compare to power? Then offer them everything we have, said Elder Tolwan. Our cities, our technology, our very souls if necessary. Nothing is more important than the survival of our people. The other elders agreed. They gave Cathara complete authority to negotiate on behalf of their species. She could promise anything, trade anything, if it would save their world. 3 hours later, Cathara was aboard a council transport ship. Heading for the Nexus, the ship was designed for many different species, with sections filled with water for aquatic beings like herself. She floated in her cabin, looking out at the stars. Somewhere among those points of light was the stellar fragment that would destroy her home. It had been wandering through space for millions of years, a piece of some ancient disaster. Now it was aimed at the heart of everything she loved. She opened her datapad and began composing her speech. Every word had to be perfect. Every argument had to be strong. She was not just representing her government or her species. She was carrying the hopes of 8 billion souls. The transport ship jumped into hyperspace, and the stars became streaks of light. In 2 days, she would stand before the Galactic Council. She would beg them to save her people. She only hoped someone would listen. The Council Nexus was the largest structure Cathara had ever seen. It floated in empty space like a metal moon, its surface covered with docking bays and communication arrays. Ships from hundreds of worlds came and went constantly. The sight should have filled her with hope. Instead, it made her feel very small. Her transport docked at Bay 47C, which was flooded with water for aquatic species. Cathara swam through the arrival tunnel, her ceremonial robes flowing around her. She had chosen her finest clothing for this moment. The fabric was woven from sea silk and decorated with pearls that caught the light. She wanted to look dignified, worthy of respect. A protocol droid met her at the entrance. It was a tall silver machine with glowing blue eyes. Ambassador Cathara of Aquanus Prime, it said in perfect serenity. You are scheduled to address the council in 2 hours. Please follow me to the preparation chamber. The droid led her through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. She saw the insect-like Vorthek clicking to each other in their rapid language. A group of Drakmori warriors stomped past, their scales gleaming under the lights. Ethereal beings floated like glowing clouds, speaking in harmonics only they could understand. None of them looked at her. To them, she was just another minor species with minor problems. The preparation chamber was a small room with water on one side and air on the other. Cathara floated near the surface so she could breathe both water and air when needed. She reviewed her speech one final time, though she had memorized every word. 5 minutes until your address, the droid announced. Cathara closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing heart. Everything depended on the next hour. The lives of her people, the survival of her world, the future of everything she had ever known. The council chamber was enormous. Hundreds of seats arranged in a great spiral, each one designed for a different type of being. Some seats were filled with water, others with different gases. Some contained force fields to hold energy beings. At the center was a platform where speakers could address the entire assembly. Cathara swam to the platform in her water-filled transport bubble. Around her, representatives from dozens of species watched with varying degrees of interest. Many seemed bored, as if they had heard pleas like this before. Honored members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice carried by translators to every seat. I am Kethara of the Sereni people. I come before you today not as a politician or a traitor, but as a daughter watching her home die. She activated the holographic display, showing images of Aquinas Prime, the blue oceans, the coral cities, the schools of fish that dance through the water like living rainbows. This is my world, home to 8,400,000,000 souls. In 168 days, a stellar fragment will impact our planet. Everything you see will be destroyed. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species made sounds of sympathy. Others seemed unmoved. We have tried everything we can, Kethara continued. Our scientists have worked day and night. But we do not have the technology to stop something this large. We need help from those who do. She brought up technical specifications of the fragment. Its size, speed, composition. According to our calculations, 14 species in this chamber have weapons powerful enough to destroy this object. 27 others have tractor beam arrays that could deflect it away from our world. We are not asking for charity. We are asking for trade. Now came the hard part. In exchange for saving our world, we offer everything we have. Our libraries contain 3 million years of art, music, and literature. Our medical knowledge could heal diseases that affect many species here. Our philosophers have spent centuries studying the nature of peace and harmony. We offer all of this freely. Representative Zeltok of the Vorthic Empire was the first to respond. His insect eyes glittered as he calculated. The energy cost of destroying such an object would be enormous. Your art and music have no market value. Your medical knowledge might be useful to some species, but not enough to justify the expense. What about mining rights? Suggested Representative Dargin of the Drakmori. Does your world have valuable minerals? Kethara felt her heart sink. Our world is mostly water. We have some metals, but nothing rare or valuable. Then what strategic value do you offer? Dargin continued. Are your people warriors? Do you control important space lanes? No, Kethara admitted. We are artists and healers. We value peace above all else. The Drakmori representative made a sound that might have been laughter. A species that cannot defend itself deserves whatever fate the universe brings. An ethereal being spoke next, its voice like wind chimes. The cosmic balance must be maintained. Perhaps this fragment serves a greater purpose that we do not understand. Kethara felt tears forming in her eyes. Honored beings, this is not about cosmic balance or market value. This is about life itself. 8 billion people who laugh and love and dream. Parents who hold their children. Artists who create beauty. Healers who ease suffering. How can you put a price on that? Everything has a price, said Zeltok. That is the basis of civilization. If your people cannot pay, then perhaps your world is not meant to survive. The debate continued for hours. Motion after motion was introduced and defeated. Some species wanted to help, but said they could not afford it. Others refused to act without approval from their home governments, which could take months. The ethereals spoke about natural cycles and cosmic will. Kethara answered every question, addressed every concern. She showed them recordings of Sereni children playing in the coral gardens. She played their most beautiful music. She shared their poetry about love and hope and the wonder of being alive. None of it mattered. When the final vote was called, the result was clear. 41 species voted against intervention. 32 abstained. Only 9 voted to help, and they were all small, weak species like the Sereni themselves. The motion fails, announced the council speaker. The matter is closed. We will now move on to trade negotiations between the Vorthic Empire and the Centauri Republic. Kethara floated in her bubble, stunned. Around her, The representatives were already talking about other things: profit margins and territorial disputes and export quotas. Her people's extinction had become just another rejected motion, filed away and forgotten. She swam slowly from the chamber, her ceremonial robes now feeling like a mockery. In the corridor outside, she passed other representatives going about their business. To them, this was just another day at the Nexus. For Cathora, it was the day she learned that 8 billion lives meant nothing to a universe that measured worth in credits and power. She made it to her quarters before she started crying. Great, racking sobs that shook her entire body. Her people were doomed, and she had failed them. In 168 days, Aquinas Prime would burn, and no one in the galaxy cared enough to stop it. Outside her window, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere among them was her home world, spinning peacefully through space, unaware that its children had been abandoned by the civilized galaxy. Cathara pressed her face against the glass and wept for all the souls that would soon be lost. Cathara had been floating in her quarters for 3 hours, staring at nothing. Her eyes were red from crying. Her throat hurt from sobbing. Outside her window, the stars continued their ancient dance. Uncaring that her world was doomed. She had sent the message to her people already. Short and simple. The council voted no. I am sorry. Elder Numara had replied with just 2 words: come home. But Cathara could not bring herself to leave yet. Going home meant watching her world die. Maybe she should just end it here. Better to die in space than to watch 8 billion people burn. She was reaching for the environmental controls when her communication device buzzed. The caller identification made her pause. Human Confederation Embassy. Cathara frowned. Why would the humans want to talk to her? They were one of the newest species in the council, barely members for 100 years. Their representative had not even been at the session today. She accepted the call. A human woman appeared on the screen. She looked middle-aged by human standards, with short gray hair and kind brown eyes. Her skin was dark, marked with lines that spoke of years spent under harsh suns. She wore a simple blue uniform with the Earth symbol on the collar. Ambassador Cathara, the woman said. I am Sarah Chun, representing the Human Confederation. I heard about your situation. Cathara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you for your sympathy, Ambassador Chun, but there is nothing more to be done. The council has made its decision. Actually, there might be something. Chun leaned forward, her expression serious. We want to help. For a moment, Cathara thought she had misheard. Help? But humans are not a powerful species. You do not have the technology to stop a stellar fragment. Maybe not the way other species would do it, Chun admitted. But we have ships, and we have people who are willing to try. More importantly, we have experience with long shots. Cathara shook her head. I do not understand. What could humans gain by helping us? We have nothing to offer you. Chun smiled, and something in her expression reminded Cathara of her own grandmother. You asked for help. That is enough. But the council already voted. If you help us, you will anger the major powers. The Vorthic might stop trading with you. The Drakmori might see it as weakness. Let them. Chun shrugged. We have faced worse than angry traders and warrior birds. Cathara felt a spark of hope, but she tried to crush it. Hope was dangerous now. Ambassador Chun, I appreciate your kindness, but this is impossible. The fragment is enormous. It would take dozens of ships and massive amounts of energy to stop it. How many ships do you think we have? I do not know. A few hundred? 1,000? Chun smiled again. Try 50,000 combat vessels, plus twice. That many civilian ships that can be converted for emergency use. We may be new to the galactic community, but we have been building ships for a long time. Cathara stared at the human woman. 50,000 ships? But your world was only discovered by the Council 93 years ago. Discovered by the Council, yes. But humans have been traveling in space for much longer than that. We just kept to ourselves until we were ready to meet the galaxy. Chun paused. Would you like to know why we stayed hidden for so long? Kathara nodded, though she was not sure she wanted to hear the answer. Because we learned early that the galaxy can be a cold place, Chun explained. 300 years ago, we received a signal from space, a distress call from a dying ship. The crew was from a species called the Kelrani. Their world had been destroyed by a plague, and they were the last survivors of their entire civilization. What happened to them? They died, Chun said simply. We were too primitive then to help them. No faster-than-light travel, no advanced medicine. All we could do was listen to their final messages and promise that someday, if we found others in need, we would do better. Kathara felt her heart racing. That is why you want to help us? Because of a promise made to dead aliens? Partly. But mostly because it is the right thing to do. Chun leaned back in her chair. Kathara, I want to tell you something about humans. We are not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced. But we have one trait that seems to be rare in this galaxy. What trait? We care about strangers. Chun held up her hand as Kathara started to speak. I know that sounds simple, but think about it. When was the last time you heard of a species helping another with no hope of gain? When did the Vorthik ever spend their money to save people they had never met? When did the Drakmori ever risk their warriors for someone else's children? Kathara had to admit that she could not think of any examples. Humans are different, Chun continued. Maybe it is because we evolved on a dangerous world where cooperation meant survival. Maybe it is because we remember what it was like to be alone in the universe. But when we see suffering that we can prevent, we feel obligated to try. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. Chun's voice grew quiet. My own great-grandfather died in a war fighting to save people he had never met. He left behind a wife and 3 children. When my great-grandmother asked him why he was going, he said that someone had to stand between the innocent and the darkness. Kathara felt tears starting again, but these were different tears. You would really do this? Risk your ships and your people for strangers? Not strangers, Chun corrected. Neighbors. We all share this galaxy. What happens to you matters to us. For the first time in hours, Kathara felt hope growing in her chest. What would you need from us? Detailed scans of the fragment, navigation data for your system, landing rights on your world to coordinate the operation, and trust that we know what we are doing, even if our methods seem strange. I can get you all of that, Kathara said quickly. But Ambassador Chun, you must understand the risks. This could destroy your relationship with the major powers. Chun laughed, a sound full of warmth. Kathara, my people once fought a war against half the world to free slaves we had never met. We fought another war to stop genocide on the other side of our planet. We have a long history of making powerful enemies when we think something is right. And if you fail, if the fragment cannot be stopped, then we fail together. Chun's expression grew serious again. But I will tell you a secret about humans. We are very good at doing impossible things when someone else's life depends on it. Kathara found herself smiling through her tears. How soon can you begin? Our ships are already moving, Chun admitted. I sent the order 3 hours ago, right after I heard about the council vote. We will reach your system in 15 days. You decided to help us before you even called me? We decided to help you the moment we learned you were in trouble, Chun said. This call was just to let you know we were coming. After the call ended, Kathara floated in her quarters, trying to process what had just happened. The most powerful species in the galaxy had turned their backs on her people. But the humans, barely more than newcomers, had mobilized their entire fleet to help strangers. She thought about what Chun had said. Humans cared about strangers. They felt obligated to help when they saw suffering. These were not traits valued by the Council. The Vorthok would call it wasteful. The Drakmori would call it weak. The Ethereals would call it interference. Maybe they were right. Maybe humans were foolish to risk everything for people they had never met. But as Cathara composed a new message to her people, she found herself hoping that the galaxy had room for beautiful fools. When the human fleet arrived at Aquinas Prime, Cathara could hardly believe what she was seeing. The ships filled space around her world like a metal cloud. There were massive cargo vessels, converted mining platforms, industrial construction ships, and sleek military cruisers. Most were painted with the blue and white colors of Earth, but some bore the symbols of colonies and corporations. 53,000 ships, reported Admiral Marcus Torres from the flagship Endeavour, plus 200,000 volunteers from across human space. Engineers, scientists, pilots, soldiers, and about 10,000 people who just wanted to help even though they have no special training. Cathara was aboard the human command ship, watching the operation through their sensors. She had never seen so many vessels working together. How did you gather so many ships so quickly? Word spreads fast in human space, Torres explained. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands. When people heard about your situation, they started volunteering. Cargo companies donated ships. Mining corporations sent their best equipment. Military reserves activated themselves without orders. Without orders? Torres smiled. Humans do not always wait for permission to do the right thing. My own son is out there somewhere, flying a converted freighter. I told him to stay home, but he said someone had to stand up for people who could not stand up for themselves. Through the view screen, Cathara could see the stellar fragment. It was a dark, irregular shape against the stars, larger than any mountain on her world. Instruments showed it was made of dense metals and rock, moving at incredible speed toward Aquinas Prime. How do you plan to stop something so large? She asked. We are not going to stop it, Torres said. We are going to break it apart and push the pieces away from your world. The plan was unlike anything the Sereni had imagined. Instead of using massive energy weapons like other species might, the humans were positioning thousands of ships around the fragment. Each carried nuclear charges and industrial tractor beams. They would detonate explosives at precise points to fracture the object, then use their ships to push the pieces into safe orbits. It will take perfect timing, explained Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the chief scientist. Every charge must explode at exactly the right moment. Every ship must be in the right position. If we make mistakes, some pieces could still hit your world. Cathara watched human crews working in the void of space. They moved with purpose and determination, but also with a calm she had not expected. These people were risking their lives for strangers, but they seemed to think it was the most natural thing in the world. Are your people not afraid? She asked Torres. Of course they are afraid, he replied. Fear keeps you alert. But they are more afraid of doing nothing while your people die. On the bridge, communication channels buzzed with activity. Ship captains reported their positions. Engineers discussed technical problems. Pilots joked with each other to keep their spirits up. Through it all, Cathara heard something that amazed her. They talked about her people as if they were family. Remember, we have kids down there depending on us, said one pilot. My daughter is about the same age as some of these Sereni children, added another. We cannot let them down. All stations, this is Admiral Torres. The command announcement came. Begin final positioning. Remember, we get one chance at this. Make it count. The next 6 hours were the longest of Cathara's life. She watched thousands of human ships move into position around the fragment. Each one had to be perfectly placed. Too close, and the explosion would destroy them. Too far, and the tractor beams would not be strong enough. 3 human ships were lost during positioning, when debris from the fragment damaged their engines. Rescue vessels immediately moved to save the crews, but 12 humans died in the cold of space to save people they had never met. "Should we call off the operation?" asked Dr. Santos. "We could evacuate your people instead." Cathara shook her head. "Where would we go? This is our only home. And those 12 people died to save us. We cannot make their sacrifice meaningless." At exactly 14 hours and 37 minutes, Admiral Torres gave the order. "All ships, execute Operation Shieldbreak. Fire when ready." Space lit up like a new star being born. Thousands of nuclear charges detonated simultaneously, each one carefully placed to split the fragment along its weakest points. The massive object broke apart exactly as the human computers had predicted. Pieces flew in all directions, some as large as cities. Then came the hard part. Human ships immediately moved to intercept the fragments that were still aimed at Aquanus Prime. Their tractor beams reached out like invisible hands, grabbing pieces of rock and metal and pushing them away. "Fragment 7 is not responding to tractor beam," reported Captain Lisa Wong from the destroyer Vigilant. "It is still on course for the northern continent." "Moving to intercept," responded the crew of a converted cargo ship called Second Chance. "We can get between it and the planet." Cathar watched in horror as the civilian vessel flew directly into the path of a fragment the size of a small moon. The ship's tractor beam strained against the massive object, engines glowing white-hot with effort. "Second Chance, your engines are overheating," warned Torres. "Pull back before you lose power." "Negative, Admiral," came the reply. "We have kids on that continent. We are not backing down." The cargo ship held position for 8 critical minutes, using every bit of power to slow the fragment. When their engines finally failed, other ships moved in to take over. The fragment was deflected just enough to miss Aquanus Prime. Though it came so close that tidal effects caused massive waves across the planet's surface. The crew of Second Chance was rescued, but their ship was destroyed. Captain Maria Gutierrez and her team of 30 volunteers had sacrificed their vessel to save millions of Serini they would never meet. Status report. Ordered Torres when the immediate danger had passed. "All major fragments deflected," reported Dr. Santos. "Some smaller pieces may still impact the planet, but nothing larger than a few meters. Evacuation of coastal areas is recommended for the next 72 hours. Tathara felt her legs give out. She sank to the floor of the bridge, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. Her world was saved. Her people would live. "Thank you," she whispered, then louder. "Thank you." Admiral Torres knelt beside her. "You do not need to thank us. We did what anyone should do. But you are the only ones who did do it," Cathara pointed out. "The entire council turned their backs on us. Only humans answered our call. Then maybe the council needs to learn something about what it means to be civilized," Torres said quietly. Over the next 3 days, human ships continued to patrol the system, making sure no dangerous fragments remained. Teams of engineers and scientists worked with the Serini to monitor the planet for any damage. When small meteors did fall into the oceans, human and Serini rescue teams worked together to help anyone who was hurt. Cathara spent those days aboard human ships, learning about the people who had saved her world. She met Captain Wong, who had 3 children back on Earth, and said she could not imagine letting someone else's children die. She talked with Dr. Santos, who explained that human scientists had a saying, "Knowledge shared is knowledge doubled." Most amazingly, she met some of the volunteers who had no special skills. A baker from Mars who had converted his cargo ship to help. A teacher from Luna who served as a communications officer, a farmer from Titan who worked in the engine rooms. "Why did you come?" she asked the baker, a cheerful man named David Kim. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "I have a bakery to run and a family to feed. But what kind of person would I be if I stayed home while people died just because no one cared enough to save them?" On the fourth day, as the last human ships prepared to leave, Cathar made a decision that would change her life. She resigned her position as ambassador to Aquinas Prime and requested permission to join the Human Confederation as a cultural attaché. "Why?" asked Admiral Torres. Cathar looked out at the blue oceans of her saved world. "Because I want to learn what makes humans different. I want to understand how a species can care so much about strangers. And I want to help spread that caring to the rest of the galaxy." Torres smiled. "Welcome to humanity, Ambassador. We are glad to have you." 6 months after the rescue of Aquinas Prime, Cathar stood before the Galactic Council once again. This time, she was not pleading for her people's lives. This time, she was speaking as the first non-human ambassador to the Human Confederation. The chamber looked the same as before. The same representatives sat in the same seats, discussing the same types of trade agreements and territorial disputes. But Tethera saw everything differently now. She had spent half a year living among humans, learning their ways, trying to understand what made them unique. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice steady and strong. "I come before you today not to ask for help, but to share what I have learned about the species you call young and naive." Representative Zeltok of the Vorthik clicked his mandibles impatiently. "We do not need lessons from humans or their pets." Cathara ignored the insult. She had expected it. "When my people faced extinction, I stood in this chamber and begged for help. 41 species voted to let us die. You calculated our worth and found us lacking. Only one species answered our call. The humans acted foolishly," said Representative Dorgan of the Drakmori. "They wasted resources and risked their own people for nothing. It shows weakness, does it?" Cathara activated the holographic display. Images of the rescue operation filled the chamber. Human ships working together, crews risking their lives, volunteers giving everything they had to save strangers. I lived among them for 6 months. I studied their history, their culture, their way of thinking. Let me tell you what I discovered. She changed the display to show Earth's history. Wars and disasters, but also acts of incredible courage and compassion. Humans rushing into burning buildings to save people they did not know. Soldiers dying to protect civilians in foreign lands. Scientists working for free to cure diseases that affected people they would never meet. Humans have a saying, Cathara continued. With great power comes great responsibility. They believe that the ability to help creates the obligation to try. This is not weakness. This is the strongest philosophy in the galaxy. Representative Vexana of the Ethereal Collective spoke in their musical voice. We have observed the humans for decades. They are emotional and impulsive. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. You are right, Cathara agreed. They do make decisions based on feelings. They feel sad when they see suffering. They feel angry when they see injustice. They feel obligated when they see someone in need. You call this a flaw. I call it civilization. She changed the display again, showing the current state of Aquinas Prime. The cities had been rebuilt. The coral gardens were flourishing. Children played in schools that existed only because humans had cared enough to save them. While you debated profit margins and strategic value, 8,400,000,000 souls continued to live. They create art and music. They discover new ways to heal. They raise children who will grow up to make the galaxy better. All because one species chose to see them as people instead of numbers. Representative Zeltok made a dismissive sound. Sentiment does not build empires or ensure survival. Logic and profit do they? Cathara asked. Tell me, Representative Zeltok, what happens when your empire faces a threat it cannot handle alone? Who will help you? The species you have exploited for profit? The worlds you have abandoned when they became unprofitable? Or will you find yourself alone, just as my people were? The chamber fell quiet. Cathara could see some representatives shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Humans are building something different, she continued. Not an empire based on fear or profit, but an alliance based on mutual care. They do not ask what you can give them. They ask what you need. They do not calculate the cost of helping. They calculate the cost of not helping. She brought up new images. Human colonies that included refugees from wars. Human hospitals treating aliens for free. Human schools where children from dozens of species learn together. In the 6 months since they saved my world, 3 other species have joined the Human Confederation. Not because humans conquered them or bribed them, but because they wanted to be part of something better. The Kelrani, who thought their species was extinct, were found living on a distant world. Humans spent 5 years helping them rebuild their civilization. The Zephyrins were facing economic collapse. Instead of exploiting their weakness, humans shared their technology freely. Representative Dorgan snorted. And what do the humans get from this charity? They get allies who would die for them, Cathara said simply. They get friends who trust them completely. They get a galaxy where children can grow up safe. Is that not worth more than credits or territory? She paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had shown her no mercy 6 months ago. I know what you are thinking. You believe this human compassion is a temporary thing. You think that when they become more powerful, they will become like you, cold and calculating. But I have studied their history. For thousands of years, even when they were fighting each other, humans have had a concept they call heroism. The idea that some things are more important than personal gain. The display showed images of human heroes throughout history. Soldiers who threw themselves on grenades to save their friends. Scientists who infected themselves with diseases to test cures. Ordinary people who risked everything to hide persecuted families from their enemies. This is not new behavior for humans, Cathara explained. This is who they have always been. They just had to grow strong enough to help others the way they helped each other. She closed the display and faced the chamber directly. You call them naive because they care about strangers. You call them weak because they help people who cannot help themselves. You call them foolish because they choose compassion over profit. But let me ask you something. When the history of this galaxy is written, who do you think will be remembered as the heroes? The species who calculated the worth of others and found them wanting? Or the species who heard a cry for help and answered? Cathara took a deep breath. My people were dying, and we cried for aid to this council. Only humanity responded to us. Not because we could pay them. Not because we were strategically important. But because we asked for help, and they could not bear to see us suffer. She began to swim away from the platform, then turned back. I leave you with this thought. Someday, each of your worlds may face a crisis that threatens everything you hold dear. When that day comes, will you want the galaxy to be filled with species like yourselves? Cold and calculating, measuring your worth in credits and power? Or will you hope that somewhere among the stars, there are still people who believe that the cry of a stranger is reason enough to risk everything? As Cathara swam from the chamber, she could hear arguments breaking out behind her. Some representatives were angry at her words. Others seemed thoughtful. A few appeared shaken. She did not care what they decided. Her job was done. In her quarters, she composed a message to her people back on Aquinas Prime. It was simple. The galaxy is changing. Humanity is showing us a better way. We should learn from them. Then she composed another message, this one to Admiral Torres on Earth. Thank you for saving us. Now let us help you save everyone else." Outside her window, the stars looked different than they had 6 months ago. They no longer seemed cold and distant. Now they looked like homes, like places where people lived and loved and dreamed. And somewhere among them, human ships were traveling to help anyone who needed it. It would take time for the rest of the galaxy to understand what humans represented. Many species would resist the idea that compassion could be stronger than calculation. But Kethera had seen the future in the brave faces of the volunteers who had saved her world. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, but it was no longer hopeless. Humanity had reminded everyone that some things were worth fighting for, even if you got nothing in return except the knowledge that you had done what was right. Especially then. In her final log entry that night, Kethera, they call humanity young and naive, driven by emotion rather than logic. Perhaps they are right. But when my people faced extinction in the cold vacuum of space, logic calculated our worth and found us wanting. Only human emotion heard our cries and answered. If this is what they call naive, then I pray more species learn to be naive. For in a galaxy that measures worth in profit and power, sometimes it takes beautiful madness to simply care that others live.